What's going on, everyone? It's LJ. And once again, a box of records has left the northeastern United States, destined for Canada. And a box of records has left Canada, destined for the northeastern United States. Once again, Tradin records, old school with a friend. And again, it's fellow YouTube vinyl community member, Ottavio, whose Guess I'm Just a Spud Boy here on YouTube. Tradin records with Ottavio is a blast. Again, he's got access to things in Canada that just aren't available here in the States, and vice versa. And this time, Ottavio's working on hulking up his jazz section, so I sent over a nice stack of jazz records to him, and over this way came some pretty incredible stuff. In the last package, Ottavio introduced me to a band that completely flew under the radar for me, and that is 5440. He mentioned that they had another one, and this is that other one. It's the debut. If you remember from the last video, something that Ottavio and I have always done is kind of put a post-it note on the record. Kind of clue you in. What's it all about? Why am I sending it to you? Now on this one, it says, as promised, you get the flat vinyl and cover with ringware. I keep the opposite. The hit I Go Blind, made famous by Hootie and the Blowfish, is on this record. So, what did I think of this record? This record is a bit of a pop culture Cuisinart. Listening to it, I got everything from early U2 to the Pretenders to Depeche Mode to anything else that you can think about in that vein from the 80s, even the little replacements. Not quite as strong as the second record, but still a really good one. You've got to love your Headpins. The Headpins are a band that I've been familiar with since junior high in the 80s. But collecting the Canadian pressings is something that's been difficult. Again, all a part of fun with trading with somebody who has access to that. So my entire Headpins catalog is all US pressings. Here is a Canadian pressing of their third album. Ottavio says, hey, Brian Too Loud McLeod from Chilliwack is on this. Total LJ fashion. And right you are. This is a great record. And again, it's all about being a Canadian pressing. It's a little more synthetic, if you will, than the first couple, but no less a rocking production and very cool to have a Canadian copy in the collection. Next up is a band I knew absolutely nothing about, and that is Rough Trade. So on first spin, I would say if you were to toss 70s funk, a whole bunch of synthesizers, and new wave in a blender, this is what would come pouring out. So I had no idea what to expect going into this. Now, Ottavio says Gatto wrote a song about this chick on Who Cares? It was called Carol, Kiss My Whip, and it was about Carol Pope. I had absolutely no idea. And the funny thing is, I do have that Gatto album. I also got that from Ottavio a couple of years ago. I had no idea Carol was Carol Pope, or that Carol even existed. But it's here. Now, the other thing Ottavio said is that collect Canadian records long enough, and inevitably you're going to come across the True North label. So this is my first True North record, and again, not a bad record, one that's going to take some real time to adjust to. Rough Trade fan, let me know what you think. Anybody have any idea why Greg Godovitz singled out Carol Pope and wrote a song about her? I'd love to know. 1983 and Coney Hatch's second album of, I believe they released 3 in their heyday in the 80s. Coney Hatch is a fantastic band. Now their first album had Kim Mitchell from Max Webster producing it. This one has Max Norman, who worked with Ozzy on his first couple solo albums and would work with Megadeth as well. And this being 1983, this is kind of that cutting edge of MTV hair metal really just starting, coming away from the early 80s rock of the first album. And this is a fantastic listen. I absolutely love this record. I have their first 3 records, but what I didn't have, again, is Canadian pressings. And that's what makes this fantastic. And there's that gorgeous Canadian Anthem label. Now, for anyone in Canada, there's probably nothing gorgeous about the Anthem label. But for a US collector, to see the Anthem label is just something that you can't find. Mercury, MCA, all these US-based labels all over the place, easy to find. But as I've said many times, the Anthem label, the Attic Records label, these are like what Blue Note and Cadet is to a jazz collector. It's just, there's something so authentic about seeing a Canadian rock band record with the Anthem label or the Attic label spinning on the turntable. So Ottavio says, again, Max Webster connection. Mike Tilka, bass player for the Max Machine, was executive producer here. You wanted Anthem records? You got them. And this is a fantastic addition to the Coney Hatch collection. And here's my US pressing, and again you can see mine is on the Mercury label. So very easy to find, so to add an Anthem pressing to the collection was killer. Let's get into some classic country. Here's Canada's Singin' Ranger, Hank Snow. Ottavio says Hank Snow is to Canada what Hank Williams is to the USA. I didn't know much of anything about Hank Snow, and for as much as I love classic country, man, that's a sin, because this was an excellent record. And the easiest way to pin it down is that is exactly right. He is Canada's Hank Williams Sr. If you dig Hank Sr., you'll dig Hank Snow. Cool record. Keeping it heavy, here is Sabbath's Greatest Hits. This was a really cool unexpected surprise to pull out of the package. Ottavio says, my folks have a book about art still at their house. At a young age, a picture of this painting gave me nightmares. It depicts the plague. Now this is a fantastic record. This particular one is a Dutch pressing on the NEMS label. Now, what's cool about this, I already had that record. Here's my copy. It's a UK pressing, but it's a sealed original. So I've never spun it. So it's very cool to finally have an open copy that I can spin. And I guess I should probably crack this one open at some point and listen to it. But to be honest, now that I have an unsealed copy, it probably ain't gonna happen. One more and then we get into the real crux of this trade. Here is Crocus's 4th album, Metal Rendezvous. Again, a record that I already had a US pressing of. Now, it was at this point, this is the first album that Crocus switched singers. This is a Canadian pressing on Areola. Here's my US pressing, and this one is just simply on Arista. And so this is the first album that Mark Storrs took over on vocals after 3 with Chris Von Rohr on vocals. Chris is still in the band, he's just not singing. And this is really the first hard rockin' Crocus album. The Crocus that everyone would come to know and love. Now, Ottavio says, this was in heavy rotation in the new wave of British heavy metal days of 1980-81, even though these guys are Swiss. But you know what? He's right, because it spins as a perfect counterpart to any of those albums. Great early 80s hard rockin' sound. Check it out. And now here's what this trade was really about. I'm a Rush nut. Rush is easily in my top 3 favorite bands, always competing for that top spot. Now, I have all of these albums, but I have US pressings. So like any collector, you want to collect those other pressings, those different variations, and Rush is no exception. Finding Canadian pressings of Rush albums here in the States, next to impossible. Here is a handful of Canadian pressings. Here is Rush's first album, and there's that Anthem label. Here is Fly By Night on Anthem as well. A bit of an oddity. Here is Caress of Steel. No oddity, common album. But even though it's a Canadian pressing, it's on the Mercury Chicago Skyline label. So, not every Rush album bore the Anthem label. Or they did, but they also bore the Mercury label. So I'm told by Ottavio, there's a mix of both, and he's going to keep working on trying to track down an Anthem copy, which would be awesome. Here's a Canadian pressing of 2112. Same thing. There's that Mercury label. But a cool difference here, you know it's a Canadian pressing. Let's see if we can hone in on that. There's your maple leaf. Very, very small, very unique identifier to let you know you've got a Canadian pressing of one of the greatest classic rock albums ever. Here's All the World's a Stage. Rush's most raw, most live, most real live album. This album's fantastic, and on Anthem. Here's a copy of A Farewell to Kings. I absolutely love this record. So again, down here in the corner, you've got the Anthem logo, and again, it's an Anthem pressing. But what took the cake is Hemispheres. Hemispheres is a great record, and I have a couple copies of this, but what I've tried to track down for years is the red vinyl version. This was released in Canada only at a time where colored vinyl was truly something special. It didn't happen often. It wasn't a standard on every album. Splatter vinyl, Dayglow vinyl, orange vinyl, pink nail polish vinyl. Give me a break. It used to be special, and this is why. Not a hard album to track down, but to track it down in the States for a decent price, insanely difficult. Rounding things out, here is Permanent Waves, another fantastic record, and another Anthem pressing. Moving Pictures, who doesn't know YYZ? Who doesn't know Tom Sawyer? Who does not know this album? And this one has its custom label, much like the one in the US did, but it's got the Anthem logo up at the top of the record. Here is Exit Stage Left. As much as I love All the World's a Stage and its raw production and its real heavy, hard-hitting rock, Exit Stage Left has always been my favorite Rush live album. And this, much the same way as Moving Pictures did, has the custom label with the Anthem logo at top. And the last one in the stack is a Canadian copy of Signals. And much like Exit Stage Left and Moving Pictures, this one has the vanity label, like my US copy does, but it has the Anthem stamp on it, which is just fantastic. Ottavio, fantastic trade. Thank you so much for a killer box of records. I truly hope you got as much enjoyment and will get as much enjoyment out of your box as I did with this one. Absolutely fantastic. Everyone, thanks for watching. Feel free to leave a comment below if you have one, and I'll catch you in the next video. Later.